Well, what I thought I would talk about, and probably we will talk a lot about between now and August 14th, is the changes from the NAR settlement and what things are coming about and what we need to make sure we're doing and being prepared and ready for. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And where I thought I would start is by, you may have noticed I said August 14th, and we've been saying August 17th all along. So August 17th is the deadline, but our MLS has decided to do it August 14th. So as of August 14th now is which we're really coming up on pretty quick here now, is when all of the changes and things are going to take place. So all reference to any buyer broker or buyer agency commission will be removed as of August 14th from the MLS. Now, that also will include any historical data. So looking back to see historically what was offered is going to be removed as well. So all of the forms, everything's going to be updated that way, and there cannot be any reference to that on the MLS or any feeds that go out from the MLS. So some people have wondered about, oh, is there a way we could still have it feed to like Century 21's website and then have it show the commission there? And any feeds that are being provided by the MLS cannot have a reference to a buyer broker or a buyer agent commission anywhere as well. Now, outside of that, you can advertise anywhere you want. So there are companies that are creating their own websites where they would go in and put what the buyer broker or the buyer agent commission is going to be offered on that property. We talked to Jason and I yesterday with George a little bit about that, and we don't think that that's something we are going to pursue, at least initially. We'll see what happens down the road. But at this point, though, and part of the reasoning on that, by the way, is just I kind of think it doesn't really matter too much, and we'll get into that here in just a few minutes. So any reference to buyer broker, buyer agent commissions will no longer be available as of August 14th. Okay. All of the forms and things will be updated, which I'm going to pull up, and we'll talk about some of the forms here in just a few minutes. But all of those will be available somewhere around August 5th. So those should be coming up about 10 days ish before, or I guess 9 days before all of everything is becoming effective. So just as an FYI. One other side note, though, that we have talked about a few times, but just as a reminder, is you can still talk about both in the agent remarks or the public remarks about the seller being willing to offer concessions. So you can put that in there and put in that the seller will pay up to X% or however much dollars you want to put in there in terms of concessions for the buyer. Now, that those concessions could be used as part of the buyer agent commission or a buyer broker fee, the buyer brokerage fee, whatever you want. The thing to keep in mind, though, and to make sure that your seller understands, is if you are going to market it that way and say seller's willing to offer X amount of money in concessions, if the buyer comes in and just asks for just concessions only, then it's not like the seller can say, oh, no, that was only if they were going to be used for the buyer agent commissions. So just kind of as a heads up, it's okay to talk about concessions. It's actually okay after the sale to put how much was done in concessions. Just, I would say probably to think of it is in the past, and I know for me, all the training that I have done over the years, specifically new agents, when they look at an MLS and would be like, well, what's the concessions section on the MLS? And I always in the past would say, well, that was the buyer getting the seller to pay their closing costs. Well, now it could be the buyer getting the seller to pay their closing costs, or it could be them getting to pay their brokerage fee on behalf. So just know that the concessions piece is all okay. It just can't have any reference or talk about buyer agent commissions. I did hear somebody say the other day that, oh, but it is okay to talk about it in the agent remarks, the commissions, and that is not true. So if you have heard that or thought that, You cannot put it in the agent remarks, anything that way. Just only the concessions piece. So, okay. The other things to just kind of hit on real quick is that the people who will be policing this or enforcing it, whichever way you want to look at it, I guess, is going to be the MLS. So I think I had said in the past that I thought it was going to be the board that would be doing it, and it would be like ethics violations. But now I've gotten some more information, and it actually is going to be the MLS that is policing these things. So the idea is if you did somehow put something on there about commissions, that they will then fine you. So the MLS has reference to saying that it has been updated, but I haven't been able to see what the fine is. My guess would be I know that the Washington County MLS has, and the Washington County Board has said that their fine is going to be $500 for the first offense, 750 for the second, and then 1,000 for the third. And so my guess would be that the Wasatch Front or UtahRealEstate.com will be very similar to that. So just know that that's who will be policing these things and making sure that it takes place. The same would go actually for you making sure that you have a written agreement with your buyer before showing them homes as well. Is it looks like it will be them enforcing that as well. Like I say, I still kind of wonder a little bit if that may shift to being the board, but that's who's going to be policing these things. And again, as a reminder, all of this is going to go into effect starting Wednesday, August 14th. So, all right. Any questions on that? And if not, then I'm going to jump into some of the forms and talk about some of the things there.
Russ, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good. I have a couple of questions, maybe not specifically on what you're talking about, but I am wondering for our current listings, are we going to need to have a new listing agreement signed or any changes made to a current listing because the seller is offering a BAC?
Yeah, great question. So on that, it depends on. So I did do an update to our listing agreement about a month ago. And so if you have a listing that does have a reference in section 2 of the exclusive right to sell to offering a compensation on the MLS, then yes, you will need to do an addendum. And the addendum basically just needs to say any reference to offering compensation on the MLS is removed from the contract. So it doesn't have to be anything, major, but just basically saying there will be no, and you could even just word it that way. There will be no offer of compensation on the MLS to a buyer agent effective on today, whatever day you're doing that, but prior to the 17th.
August
for
14.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say yeah, exactly. So the MLS has created an addendum for that you could use as well, but I would just say really hopefully any listings you have before the one I created that's on dotloop have already sold, hopefully. But if for some reason they haven't, then yes, you would need to do just an addendum removing any reference to that. So, and you could use the one that the MLS has created if you wanted to.
Okay. And do you have any direction or advice on how to explain or talk to our sellers about that? So for instance, I do have a very old listing, unfortunately. And they have offered a 3% BAC, and now we will be changing that. Am I, as an agent, as the seller's agent, am I responsible to explain to the seller that, you can still offer this compensation to the buyer's agent, or you don't have to, or what kind of a position advice should giving to the seller?
Yeah, I think probably what I would say is for me, at least this is my feeling, is I think I would go to the seller and just say, hey, because of the this settlement, we can no longer offer it on the MLS. That doesn't mean you can't pay it. It doesn't mean you shouldn't pay it, but we just can't advertise it there. You know, you could put a sign inside the property that says that you're paying it, whatever, but I would make sure to just tell the seller that it is still going to be to your advantage to offer that, because the buyers that are coming in are going to have to pay it themselves, and you just are opening up your pool of buyers, making it more accessible to buyers who maybe have enough for a down payment but don't have enough money to pay their buyer agent the commission. And so it's possible that that could affect them having an interest or making an offer on your home. So now we do have to be careful a little bit with that in terms of like saying, what we can't do is make people feel like if you don't do this, your house isn't going to sell, because that's not
Right,
necessarily true. But
right.
so I don't know. Is that helpful
It is
or
helpful.
no?
I'm just trying to,
No.
well, no, I'm trying to figure out overall the type of script or conversation I should be having with my clients moving forward, about, buyer agent commissions, because, I believe, and I think we all believe that there's a benefit to offering the buyer's agent a commission, but on both sides of the transaction, um, there's some language and some conversation that needs to happen that could be delicate, could be interesting. I just feel like I'd like to be able to explain things a little bit to my seller, answer questions, educate them. And I guess I'm just looking for a little additional guidance on that. I mean, obviously, we've been doing this for years and it's not going to change a whole lot, but um, I don't know, just looking for a little bit of additional advice or guidance on how to have conversations with both the buyer and the seller. On the buying side, I see a little bit of a challenge there for many first-time home buyers. If the seller does not offer any concession or compensation, how, as a brokerage, have we talked about creative ways that we can help buyers, first-time home buyers in particular, which I think will be most affected by maybe having to pay a buyer's agent commission themselves. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and so to for me on that, here's kind of been my thought process is, for many years I have, whenever I've done a CMA, I have paid attention to that concessions part of it as I've done my
Uh-huh.
CMA, so that
Uh-huh.
I could go into the seller and say, okay, when you look at these comparables of sold homes, you'll notice every single one of these comparable homes offered a concession of whatever it was, 10,000 or 5 or whatever the dollar amount was. And I would just always tell the seller, here's what you need to plan on is in the market, what these comparables are showing is in the market, buyers are needing that 3% or however much it was for the concessions for their closing costs. So, in order for us to get your home sold, we need to plan on and think about who is the most likely buyer. And so I think maybe that will help hopefully a little, is presenting it to the seller as, we've got to look at who the most likely buyer of your property is going to be. And I don't mean the exact person, but just, demographically, who is that person going to be? And what are the things that are either going to attract them to wanting to make an offer on your home, and or what are the things that they just can't buy your house if they don't get that, such as closing costs. So I've always approached it that way anyway, of like, you're going to need to plan on offering 3%. So just mentally make that note that when we get an offer, they're going to ask for it. So a lot of this is future pacing, and
Right.
so let me add one other piece to that too, because I go back to, I remember it was 1998. I was at Coldwell Banker, and they were the first ones, at least to my knowledge, we were the first ones to implement a transaction fee, or back then we called it a compliance fee of 195. And I remember being so worked up about, hey, how am I going to go convince a seller that they got to pay this fee? And every time I went in and I was worried about it, the question came up and they fought me on it. And then
Uh-huh.
one day I was sitting at a closing at the title company, and I started looking at that HUD-1, or now the closing disclosure, but I was looking at that settlement statement, and I remember seeing all these fees from the lender and all this stuff, and I was like, that 195 really is nothing. And so the moment that I then kind of went, you know what, I'm just not going to worry about it anymore. And what I mean by that is I just started doing a net sheet and putting in that compliance fee that we called it back then, putting it on there. And when I did that, what I noticed is nobody said anything. They didn't worry about it. And so from there, that led me then to being like, I wonder if I did the same thing in terms of the commission, is just I put it on the net sheet and we go through the net sheet of this is what it's going to look like to get your home sold, and put it on the net sheet. Really all they care about, and that I shouldn't say all they care about, the main thing they care about is that bottom dollar. How
That
much am I
bottom line.
walking away with? And I found as long as they were good with what that bottom line was, they didn't really care what all the rest of the stuff above it was. So I think that's another good way I would recommend to go about helping to explain it, is just saying, let's put together a net sheet. And then, especially if it is a, like you're saying, a first time homebuyer property, I would probably say put on there the buyer's going to need a 3% towards the brokerage fee. They're probably also going to need 3% for their closing costs. And I think that what we will do to deal with that will be similar to what we have done with closing costs in the past, is we're just going to see people coming in and offering maybe a little bit above list price, which, so
Uh-huh.
depending on the market, really where we're going to be in a real struggle with this will be interest rates drop 1% and the buyers come flooding off the market and we're getting multiple offers, is where that's where it's going to get really tough. But the suggestion of how I would say you may have to deal with some of that is maybe going to the lender and seeing if we can, maybe they bump the rate a little bit. Now again, I know if you guys are in person, you'd start throwing stuff at me, but I recognize where rates are at now, to ask the lender, hey, bump it a 0.5%, or to help pay for some of this stuff might not fly. But if interest rates come down and we have that type of a market, that may be one of the ways we have to go about dealing with it. So anyway, those are some
Okay.
ideas that hopefully will be helpful. But for me personally, I found doing that net sheet was the thing that helped me get 7 and even 8% commissions. Was if I felt like that it was in the seller's best interest to do an 8%, meaning offer 4 to whoever was out there in the market, I just did it in the net sheet, put it together, and they looked at the bottom dollar and they were like, okay, great. So
Okay. Gotcha. Can I ask one more question? I'm sorry to
you're good.
monopolize. Are there going to be any additional documents or instructions that we're going to have to provide to uh, the title office or anyone else in order to get a BAC paid since it's not on the MLS?
Great question. So that's a good segue to, let me go to that piece of what we were going to talk about next. So
Perfect.
what you're looking at now here, although I gotta fix it on my screen here a little bit so that I can see it a little better, is this is a new form that is called the Real Estate Brokerage Compensation Agreement. So in the past, the agreement that we have had as part of being on the MLS was that we would share those commissions. And so whatever dollar amount was there on that buyer agent commission, or now they changed to buyer broker commission, was automatically just that's what you were going to get paid. So since that is going away, if we are going to be offering a commission that way, then this is the form that will need to be filled out between the brokerages. So you'll notice on the form here that it says that it's between the seller's brokerage and the buyer's brokerage, and it's in contemplation of a potential real estate transaction between this buyer and this seller at such and such property address. And then it has actually a date that you would put in for how long will this agreement be effective for. So you're going to put in an end date there. You're going to put in what the amount of the commission would be. And so one of the thoughts that I had, but I don't believe this is going to be possible, by the way, because when I saw this form, one of the thoughts I had was, well, maybe we just get that form, we get it filled out, signed by the seller, get it signed by our brokerage, and we upload it to one of the forms on the MLS, and that's how people will know. But I have a feeling that probably isn't going to fly, but I'm going to do some more research to find out, because that would be the ideal way if we could, is just have this filled out, upload it like we do the lead-based paint disclosure. Everybody would be aware and they would just print it off and use it. So anyway, but I don't think that's going to be possible. So I think instead, this is going to be having to contact the other agent and send this over. And keeping in mind, similar to a for sale by owner, if you were to send over to a for sale by owner the for sale by owner commission agreement along with your REPSI, they could just sign the REPSI and not sign the for sale by owner commission agreement, and now they don't owe you. So the same concept would be with this form. Is with this form, you really need to get it signed before submitting your offer, because in the event they get this and say, no, we're not going to do that, then now your buyer would be stuck owing that commission based on the buyer broker. So this is the form that we would use. And I will tell you though, and again, this is just my personal opinion, but I'm kind of feeling like this is probably not the best way to go, is doing it this way. And let me show you why, is because we already have had in place the brokerage fee brokerage payment addendum. And I feel like, for me at least, and some of this may change over time, but the more I'm looking into this and the more I'm getting into it, the more I'm feeling like if I'm on the buyer side, it doesn't really, well, let me pause. Let me go back. If I'm on the seller side, I want to talk to my seller and say, plan on paying 3% or a percentage, but assume it's probably going to come in at 3. And then if it's less, great. When we get an offer, we're either going to receive this form from the other agent to sign, or we're going to receive as part of the offer. Let me pull up this next one here.
Russ, can I interject a question really quick about what you were talking about this form? Is there a way, because if we're saying we need to send this in kind of before our offer, is there a way to put something in the REPSI that connects these two together so it's not a complete contract unless both of them are signed?
So yeah, the challenge with that is, that's a good question. The challenge is that discussing the buyer agent commission as of right now, at least, now this could change, but as of right now, discussing buyer agent commission in the real estate purchase contract is an ethics violation. And so that's a good question. I'm gonna have to do some research on that to see if that will remain an ethics violation or not. But
because that would be really, it seems like if we have to send it and wait, especially if the market, gets a little bit hotter.
Yeah. And I guess the good news is, though, is in the event somebody did sign the REPSI and not this, your buyer they're still going to owe us the money. So the buyer could just cancel based on due diligence and say, we can't do it. So based on you not signing that compensation agreement. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I was going to say, to add to that, great point, Chris, is if we're not referencing it as an addendum and part of the contract, that when we do send it over, maybe it's best practice to have it be as page 1. I know when I worked at my previous brokerage out of state that was one of the first items that we would send, and it was more or less the cover page, so that it was known right up front before reviewing the offer. It wasn't at the tail end as an addendum.
Yeah, sure. And really, as I'm thinking that through, Chris, you probably could make the offer subject to the now I can't remember let me back up here. Hang on. You would have to basically put it as that the offer was subject to the real estate brokerage compensation agreement being signed between the two brokers, but let's say that it's not, you're going to just cancel based on that. So really for me, it's like you would just cancel based on a due diligence, and it's not here or there whether you did cancel based on due diligence or that compensation agreement. So I think you would just have to make sure if it doesn't get signed, you got to have a conversation with your buyer of, okay, we got to figure out a way for you to pay this now, or you either just pay it yourself, or we got to try to negotiate some other way of, raising the interest rate to get it paid for or something. But just
that
going to require
that's a
conversation.
good thought. Thanks, Miranda. That was good too, to lead with that also.
Yeah. Okay. So the next form, which you guys have seen this, it's been around, it's just been slightly modified, is the real estate brokerage payment addendum. My feeling is, really for me, I kind of feel like this is the form we should just start using. Is really, why worry too much about getting the other one signed when in essence this accomplishes the exact same thing. It's just the seller is now just going to pay the brokerage fee for the buyer. This accomplishes everything that other form does. I really just feel like when you're representing a buyer, you're going to want to just do this addendum. And which, by the way, let me pause for a minute. Exciting news, actually. And part of why I'm feeling like this is just going to be the way we're going to go is we are just waiting for the division to approve this to be added to the real estate purchase contract. So it has been submitted to the Division of Real Estate to have the real estate purchase contract have a section in there that is this brokerage fee, or excuse me, brokerage payment section will be just in the REPC, that you'll just have to check a box that say that it either is or is not, that the buyer is or is not asking the seller to pay this for them. So that's part of where I guess I feel like really almost, I think if we could look in a crystal ball down the road, I think what we're going to see is that last one that I just showed you of negotiating it between the brokerages is probably going to kind of just go away, because once this is in the REPC, why would you not just check the box, seller to pay it? And I think the other thing that's good with that is, going back to Joanna's question, was to some extent, once that's in the REPC, we can sit down with the seller and say, this is an option within the real estate purchase contract, and you can count on every buyer is going to check that box asking you to pay it. So anyway, any thoughts, questions on that one?
So for now, do you recommend using that second one you shared, the addendum?
Yes, that's what I think. If it were me, I would just say, when you're representing a buyer, just write your offer and put that addendum in, because in essence, then that going to where Chris was saying, can we just make it contingent upon them signing that brokerage compensation agreement? This one is now, it's just part of the offer. And so it just becomes a part of the negotiation that we're going to do when we're negotiating this offer. So
Question, Russ. So,
Go ahead.
You go first. Oh, sorry. So just, as we're in the negotiating and before we put an offer in, do you suggest we verbally talk to the listing agent, or is it just depending on the offer, just go ahead and submit the offer with the compensation? Maybe it's a full price offer and you're feeling confident you have an amazing buyer, very qualified, ready to go. Because sometimes if you don't say something, it might be better than, just sending it in and having that conversation first. What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's always great if you can have that conversation. I think the struggle we're going to run into is especially if it's a hot listing, is that listing agent is not going to call you back. So I think that's the bigger issue is, yes, absolutely call, talk to them and find out, because if they have it and they're planning on it, then you can use that brokerage compensation agreement and send that over and they should sign it, no problem. But I think more times than not, I mean, think about how hard it is to get an agent to call you back now. I think getting them to call back is even going to be worse on this now. So I have a feeling that really, I kind of just feel like our best bet is send over the brokerage payment addendum and just negotiate it as part of your offer.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Was there somebody else had a question?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so really, we'll wrap up just based on time here, but just know that the other thing Jason and I are looking at is they have the new board approved, or I guess UAR approved, exclusive right to sell and buyer broker agreement. And over the years, they have modified theirs actually to match a lot of the stuff we already had. So we're going to be looking at that and discussing. It's possible that we may just end up using theirs and do away with our own specific on the listing agreement and the buyer broker. But we'll let you know on that in the next week or two. But anyway,
Russ,
yes.
I do have a question. I got on a little bit late, so I apologize if this question's already been answered. In our listing appointment, can we still address commission as this is what, the commission that I charge, and this is what I'm going to offer to the buyer agent, as a buyer agent compensation? Can we still address it that way, letting them know that
Sure.
commissions
Yeah.
are always negotiable?
Yep. Yeah, that's the key thing is, and on the new listing agreement and buyer broker has it in all caps that brokerage fees are negotiable and they're not set by law or the board or anybody. So, yep, that works.
I have a kind of silly comment because I've been seeing things on Facebook pages like the Real Estate Mastermind group and people being kind of funny about the remarks that they're going to intend to put on their listings about like 3 hearts for this listing and implying that it's 3%, and it's not stating that, but it's a roundabout way of kind of making light of the situation and advertising that they are a BAC friendly listing. Is it possible, on a more serious note, is it possible for us to put in the listing remarks where information can be found, or what's the right answer for that in the agent remarks?
No.
I mean,
yeah, well, so you can't put something in there that says go to this website to see what buyer agent commissions being offered or anything. So yeah, even I've seen some of those things like you were talking about of 3 hearts for this listing and stuff. Like somebody could do that, but I think the moment it becomes clear that that's the way we're communicating it, it'll be shut down. So that's the challenge, I think, with some of that. So, and you're not going to be able to say, go to this website to see what's being offered. So really, like I say, I think a lot of it is, Jason and I were on a call with some of the top owners of Century 21s across the country. And some of them have already implemented this stuff. And the good news is what they're seeing actually is agents are actually making a little bit more money, because maybe somebody was only offering 2% on the MLS for that BAC, but the agents now are going in with their version of our brokerage payment addendum, asking for 3 and negotiating it and now getting paid 3%. So, anyway, just kind of as an FYI that it is definitely possible and likely that, that pressure we've had on the buyer agent commission going down may level off and even go back up a little bit. So,
Russ, I have one more question.
Sure.
Actually, but is it okay is when we see that we have a schedule showing on one of our listings, or do you recommend this, that we call the buyer's agent and let them know that we're offering a BAC? Are we allowed to do that?
Yes, you're allowed to do that. You can communicate the buyer agent commission or buyer broker commission anywhere outside of the MLS. So yep,
Do
there'd
you-
be nothing wrong with that.
Do you recommend that?
I probably wouldn't, because
Okay.
I mean, could be an advantage, I guess, somewhat to do that potentially, but I don't know that I would take the time to do it because, when I see people doing that is when their listing's overpriced, is where I can foresee people calling and saying, we'll offer this, is because their property's overpriced and people aren't coming.
Okay, I have
Okay, on
another
that-
question that's off topic. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jeanette. I'll wait.
Well, my question's not on topic, so go ahead.
Okay, so the question I was going to say in conjunction with that is, because Aligned is affiliated or tied to our MLS, is it okay or not okay to text? Because
No.
I use the text function through Aligned to give information about the CVS code. Would it
No.
be in favor of or against the rules to have the text conversation about commission, like Jeanette was mentioning, through Aligned texting?
Yeah, so there's not a clear answer to that because I've had that thought too, of just when you approve the listing, it automatically sends a message saying this is what we're offering. But here's how it's worded from the MLS. It says marketing and advertising offers of compensation will be prohibited on the MLS as well as on all third-party products that you access through the MLS. So I would assume, since we
Yep.
access the Align showing through the MLS, you will not be able to do that, is
Okay,
my assumption.
so yeah, text message or email in that case.
Yep. But I really do think what we're going to see is, I really think as time goes on, we're going to just see that people don't worry about calling. They just include that brokerage payment addendum with their offer, would be my guess. So, all right. Well, hey, thank you for all
So
being
can
on
I
here.
just-
Great questions.
Can I just kind of gone back and forth on a couple of things. Can I sum up what I think everything was said and correct
Sure.
me if I'm wrong?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
as you talked about it, I thought, well, the broker to broker addendum, and then you brought that broker payment addendum, which seems to solve everything. But it seems like we can verbally discuss this with clients or even when presenting an offer, but we can't make it part of the contract. And you said there's a possibility of doing this possibly on the MLS, but you first said you sort of in one form that wouldn't be allowed. So I don't believe that will ever be allowed. So that's kind of what I'm summing up with all of this. Does that
Yep.
sound on the right track?
Yeah. Like I said, you could talk about in the public remarks or agent remarks concessions. The seller is willing to pay X amount of dollars towards concessions, but you just can't mention commissions anywhere. So,
And you could put on the listing an amount. Maybe you can't in the concession area because it's under concessions. I mean, they can use that for new carpet. They can use that for anything, but it seems to me that's okay, but I'm wondering if it is.
and so that's the key, is if you say the seller will pay a percentage or a dollar amount towards buyer's concessions, then the buyer can use those for anything that is allowable by the lender.
So you can't say that, but under the listing, under concessions, oh, but you know what? That's when it's sold. Hello. So, yeah, all right. I think I
Yep.
got it.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks for being on. Have an outstanding rest of your day, and we'll continue to talk about this. We do have base camp that Jason and I will be doing on the 14th. So actually the day that all this goes into play, which we scheduled to do the base camp that day before we knew that was going to become the official date. But that's the plan, where we'll just continue to talk about it, answer questions, and help everyone go and make more money. So thanks for being with me. Have an awesome rest of your day.
Thank you, Russ.
Thanks, Russ.